Welcome everyone to another screencast. Our topic today is the Spanish-American War. And the fighting in the Spanish-American War is going to take place in two places. First one is the Philippines. It sounds a little strange, but just go with it for right now. And secondly, in Cuba. And it's going to propel a guy like Teddy Roosevelt out of the Assistant Secretary of the Navy position into a volunteer cavalry, and then ultimately to the vice presidency and then the presidency after that. Our learning outcomes: you should be able to describe the connection between Jose Marti, the United States, and the Spanish-American War. You should be able to analyze the impact yellow journalism had on the United States. Number 3, describe the reasons that the U.S. gets involved in Cuba's war for independence. And number 4, understand the reasons for debate of the Treaty of Paris. So let's set the stage really quickly. 1850, by this point, the Cubans are ready for self-government. They have a strong sense of nationalism. They are tired of being ruled by Spain. And at this point, 1850, Spain is beginning to lose their grip on their colonies. They have been one of the strongest imperial powers to this point. 1868 rolls around right after the United States Civil War. Cuba is going to fight for their own independence from Spain. It's going to take about 10 years, 1868 through 1878. They're going to fight, and ultimately they're going to come out on the losing end. It's a failed first attempt at revolution. Some Cubans are going to want the United States to buy Cuba from Spain. Spain, on the other hand, absolutely does not want any part of this. Some reports have said that the Spanish officials would sink Cuba into the ocean before they sold it to the United States. Now, Jose Marti, he's a Cuban exile. He's going to get the ball rolling in the second stage for independence. He's going to organize the resistance movement against the Spanish. He's in exile. He's living in New York at this time. He's a poet, among other things. He is going to organize this resistance through guerrilla tactics, kind of hit and run, that kind of a warfare. And his first target is going to be the American mills. And my question to you is, why? Just think about that for a second. Why would Jose Marti and other Cuban rebels target American businesses there in Cuba? If you're thinking that in targeting these American mills and other businesses that it's going to upset the American businessmen and thus kind of prompt or pressure the government into going to war against Cuba, you'd be absolutely correct. The idea is to get the United States involved to push the Spanish out of ruling Cuba. After the first failed attempt at revolution, the Spanish are going to send the butcher in. In 1896, they're going to send him to Cuba and to prevent further insurrections. The general is going to build concentration camps. This is going to be one of the first early attempts at building these concentration camps. It's soon going to be followed by the United States and the Philippines. He's going to imprison a large number of the population there in Cuba. And think back to your knowledge of World War II from world history and the concentration camps that the Nazis had. These places are brutal conditions: disease, poor food supplies, among other things. Unsanitary. Cuban prisoners are going to die very quickly while they're in these concentration camps. Diseases are going to spread very, very quickly within these areas. Now, yellow journalism. We have been talking extensively about different sources and different forms of writing. Well, this is at a point where we're going to see it at an all-time high. Yellow journalism, for a simple definition, is a sensational form of writing. We talked a little bit about it with the muckrakers. This is taking it to a whole other extreme. These newspapers are going to have very, very large headlines of very, very minor news. They're going to exaggerate the accounts, and they're going to create sympathy for the underdog. They're going to make you feel bad for that underdog. And this is going to take it a step further to the level of like a tabloid magazine, using faked interviews, misleading headlines, and false information. This is where it all stems from here with yellow journalism. The whole idea behind it is to lure and entertain their readers and to gain the support of the public. And a couple guys are going to do this very well in this time period. Pulitzer, I'm sure you've heard of him before, the New York World, and William Randolph Hearst, the New York Journal. He's also going to play a vital role in getting the United States actually into the Spanish-American War. So these two guys are going to be battling it out during the late 19th centuries. They're almost the turn of the 20th century. So, question to you, does the yellow journalism idea still exist today? We've been talking quite extensively about it, and my answer is absolutely it does. Check this headline out here. This is going back to 2001, of course, but U.S. attack, hijack jet, destroy Twin Tower, and hit Pentagon in day of terror. Not that this is minor news by any means, but you can see the huge headlines here in the New York Times, kind of accentuating the attacks on the Twin Towers. And our move towards war here. In 1897, McKinley is going to take over the presidency. He is the last of the Civil War veteran presidents. He ultimately hates war, so he's going to try to avoid the war with Spain at all costs. And he was pretty successful at first. He's going to try very diplomatic measures in the beginning. However, once Enrique de Lhomme rolls along, the Spanish minister to the United States, he's sending this letter back down to Cuba. It's going to be intercepted, and it's going to be sent to William Randolph Hearst's newspaper. William Randolph Hearst is going to edit it a little bit, sensationalize it a little bit, and it's going to be published in William Randolph Hearst's newspaper. And this ultimately is going to become known as the de Lhomme Letter. And within this de Lhomme Letter, it's going to criticize President McKinley and call him a very weak leader. And this really, quite honestly, is nothing that Teddy Roosevelt or any other of McKinley's cabinet members have said about him behind closed doors many times over. However, the difference here with the de Lhomme Letter is that now it's out in the public, and this is where McKinley is going to have to kind of take action. And the USS Maine is one of those ships that gets sent down to Cuba to protect American businesses. And while it's in Havana Harbor, it gets blown up. Public opinion at this point is going to favor war because of guys like William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer. They're going to sensationalize the effect of what happened with the Maine, among other things. And you're going to see this a lot at the time period. To hell with Spain, remember the Maine. It becomes a rallying cry for the public. They don't want these guys and the ship itself to have gone down in vain. Now, the Spanish, they are completely opposed to going to war with the United States. They know that they wouldn't really have a shot in facing the United States. So what they're going to do is make concessions to stop the war from happening. And they're going to agree to a ceasefire, among other things. However, McKinley is going to be pressured to ask Congress to use authority here. Again, he's still against it, but there's too much public pressure going on here for him to kind of sit idly by and not at least ask for Congress to use power. April 20th, 1898, the resolution of war is going to be passed by Congress, and April 24th, Spain is actually going to be the first one to declare war on us, which doesn't really matter, to be quite honest. You can see here's the warship Maine before it ends up going down, and here it is after it is sunk in Havana Harbor. And here is from the New York Journal. You can see here, destruction of the warship Maine was the work of an enemy. Think about that, and they're offering a $50,000 reward. And then you can see there in the center, Assistant Secretary Roosevelt convinced the explosion of warship was not an accident. Now, you kind of have to think when this newspaper was published and the credibility of the sources. They're talking about Roosevelt there is probably a pretty credible source. You can see down below that. Journal offers $50,000 reward for the conviction of criminals who sent 258 American sailors to their death. Naval officer unanimous that the ship was destroyed on purpose. This is the day after the ship had gone down. How do they know for sure that it was an act of malice? We don't really know for sure. As war is going to begin, it starts in the Philippines, not in Cuba, strangely enough. The first battle, again, it begins in April. Commodore Dewey fires on Manila, and he's going to destroy the Spanish fleet within 7 hours. It is really no chance that the Spanish have against the U.S. Navy at this point. He's going to get a lot of support on land for the Filipinos, who absolutely wanted independence from Spain, very similar to the Cubans, and they hope that the United States taking over will end up granting their freedom. It's going to take from April till August for the Spanish to surrender the Philippines. We're going to end up paying the Spanish $20 million for the rights to the Philippines itself. And you can see here, Dewey went around to Manila, started firing all over there, and just completely crippled the Spanish fleet. Here's another of those very large headlines, yellow journalism style. Great sea victory for America, vengeance for the Maine begun. Spain's Asiatic fleet burned and sunk. After the United States takes the victory over the Spanish in the Philippines, we're going to turn to the Caribbean. We're going to blockade Cuba. We're going to seal off the harbor there. And we're really not going to have that great of an army force. They're really untrained, and there are a lot of volunteers. We haven't really had a war or been in any sort of a battle since the Civil War. So these guys are they've been 30 plus years removed from actual battle. In step the Rough Riders, 17,000 of them to be exact. And this is where Teddy Roosevelt is going to resign his position as the Assistant Secretary to the Navy. And he's not even going to be first in command. He's actually second in command. And there's only really, those Rough Riders play a very minor role in the whole Battle of San Juan Hill and the Caribbean War itself. They're going to lead to the Spanish retreat there in the Battle of San Juan Hill. And any ships that tried to leave the harbor there in Cuba, try to get to Puerto Rico, were quickly destroyed by the other half of the Navy. So these guys don't really play that big of a role. And the strange thing is Roosevelt's going to be seen as a heroic leader, even though he really doesn't do a whole lot while he's there. Here's a picture of good old TR, soon to be our president in 1901. And here's a picture of these guys on San Juan Hill. You can see Teddy Roosevelt there in the center. And here's another one. Something that you don't hear about is, yes, there were African-American soldiers there in 1898. You see some of our brave colored boys who helped to free Cuba. This is at a time where, again, they're not known as black soldiers at all. They're very racial undertones to what they're being called. Now, the Treaty of Paris itself, December 10th, they're going to meet in Paris. August is when the ceasefire is going to actually stop the fighting. December 10th, once they meet, Cuba is going to be technically freed. However, the United States is going to maintain its holdings there. Guam and Puerto Rico are going to be given to the United States. And again, we're going to be paying $20 million to the Spanish for the rights to the Philippines. Now, the debate over the Treaty of Paris is, does the United States have the right to deny self-governments to Cuba, to Guam, to Puerto Rico, and to the Philippines? Some people actually believe that it's a violation of the Declaration of Independence and denying the rights to self-governments. That's the whole reason that we broke away from the British, right? So we're going to deny that to other people. Again, there's a little bit of a double standard there. Unfortunately, February 6, 1899, the Senate is going to approve the treaty, and all of these countries are now going to become parts of the United States, become United States territories in one way or another. The question is going to begin, though, in 1899. What do we do with these new areas? How are we going to handle them? How are we going to handle Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines? So that's something that you need to think hard and long about. And what should we have done with these two areas in 1899? How things could have been different very early on. And let's recap. You should be able to describe the connection between Jose Marti, the United States, and the Spanish-American War. And remember back, he's the one that is exiled. He's living in New York. He's going to organize the resistance in Cuba to start to destroy American businesses in hopes of getting the Americans involved in the war to defeat the Spanish. Number two, you should be able to analyze the impact yellow journalism had on the United States. Again, William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer. And the yellow journalism, sensational writing, very large headlines, and getting the attention of the reader. Number three, describe the reasons the United States gets involved in Cuba's war for independence. Again, William McKinley doesn't want to, but after the sinking of the Maine, after William Randolph Hearst and Pulitzer's sensationalized writing of what's been going on down in Cuba, he's really not going to have a lot of choice. The public pressure is going to be too much for him. And number four, you should be able to understand the reasons for debate of the Treaty of Paris. And this circles around self-governance. Do we have the right, as Americans, to govern other people when we didn't want to be governed by other people back in 1776? So, if you have any questions, let me know. Shoot me an email. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.